All right, my name is Ethan Klekus, and my research paper, or in this case, presentation, is about politics and sports, as you can see, and how the two have gone hand in hand really for a long time, hundreds of years, longer than we even realize, given that it seems like they're more apparent in the limelight as usual. But nonetheless, they've been woven together, and really they're kind of one and the same. Um, and it's and this paper kind of dives into the main point of this research paper is to examine the extent to which politics and sports are involved and viewing both sides of the non cut and dry issues. So, cut and dry, I mean, for example, um, looking back at the Jackie Robinson incident. Looking back now, that's a clear example of racism keeping Jackie Robinson out of the sport of baseball solely on the fact he was African American, his skin was black. That's a pretty clear cut issue. It was racism. Racism is bad. 99% of America can agree with that. Black and white issues are on things, like the pay gap in the women's soccer team of the WNBA. And, we're going to talk about why that's not just solely based on sexism. There's other factors involved, and both sides of the argument hold weight. But both sides of the argument, because especially when we get into the social issues, you'll realize that it's become a lot more of a left and right politically driven argument. So that's kind of what the paper tackles. So again, I like the overview of the lesson. I'll give it kind of a brief history about sports and politics. I did draw some inspiration from my personal love of sports, but also the video we watched in whatever week that was, week 13. So, I mean, you'll be seeing some similarities and examples to the examples they give in the movie. Obviously, I didn't copy the movie, but there's some similarities to it. So we'll kind of give a history of the two, of how, they go back and they're kind of, woven into each other. And then we'll talk about, modern American issues and how, because the examples we'll give in the history of the two were kind of overseas, across the pond, and not really central to America. Eventually they will be, but you'll see. And then mainly the bulk of my paper talks about social issues and how sports and politics are similar in those aspects, and that's how they're related, is within the social issue aspect of each other. And then, of course, at the very end, we'll do both sides of the argument, in, again, checking out both sides of the social issues, in particular in the modern day, the left and right aspect, and getting views on either side, whether you agree with one side or not. And usually you'll see whatever side you agree with is going to go hand in hand with your political being and your political preference. So, kind of some history of politics in sports, and so these are kind of just examples of them dating back to the 30s. So, in 1936, Hitler in Nazi Germany hosted the Olympic Games, and a lot of people don't understand that Hitler did this, and Hitler invested in sports because Hitler he didn't mind sports. He didn't love them. He didn't hate them. But he realized what sports could do for his cause in the future. We know what his plan in the future was. It was terrible. It was awful. But he saw sports for men and women alike. When men and women are in shape, they're physically active, they're strong. They are just their physical aspect is better. And he saw this in women, of course, for childbearing. He saw women who compete in sports, they're more active, they're more fit, they're stronger. They're going to be better to bear children. And on the men's side, he obviously saw the fact that, if he has bigger, better athletes, they're probably going to translate to better soldiers. If he has the world's strongest man, the world's fastest track athlete, the world's highest high jumper, these guys are going to be potential soldiers, and he can use them in his scheme. And then on top of that, Hitler in Germany wanted to kind of showcase the world that they're, rebuilding after World War One, and that the Olympics are a staple for them to show the world, like, hey, Germany's great. We're going to put on these great shows for a game. And that's what he did. And then another example was Mussolini at the time. So Mussolini, he's not pictured. He was from Italy. He wanted to kind of show the world, or not the world, but his country, that being fit and athletic and in shape and trim was good. He was going to use it to, I guess you could say, recruit the younger generation, the younger population, to join his cause. And so both of these, not so great men, use sports in different ways, but nonetheless, they use them to reinforce their political ideology, their political ideas. And in the run, to an extent, they were successful at their task in creating, the world they wanted to create for their country for a time being, and using these sporting events to their advantage. This picture here is Jesse Owens. I put Jesse Owens there kind of as a awesome moment for America. Jesse Owens owned these track races in the Olympics. He won 4 of the competitions, and kind of quieted the Germans, thinking that they're the superior race, the blonde hair, blue eyes, and Hitler refused to shake his hand. So that's kind of an awesome moment in American sports history that I wanted to put a picture of him there saluting to all the Nazi salutes. So some modern day issues that are a little more common. Pat Tillman was in that video that we watched, but he was used, sadly, as propaganda. Again, I won't go into a lot of details about Pat Tillman because you saw it in the video, but he was a stud football player, Pac-10, which is now the Pac-12, Defensive Player of the Year, turned down millions of dollars, a pretty high contract for a free safety, the position he played, to join the military. And of course, the war machine and the Bush administration jumped on this quickly. And I mean, he was a poster boy. He was Captain America. He was the guy for the war. He was, hey, Pat Tillman, millionaire football star. He went to go be a soldier. You should too. They used it as propaganda and commercials to further their war efforts overseas. And this is kind of where you start to see a bit of divide, especially with Pat Tillman's death. Because when Pat Tillman was over there, he saw some stuff that he raised eyebrows about. And one quote that I use in my paper from The Odyssey of Pat Tillman, it was a quote from his personal journal being overseas. He said, "We've had leaders telling guys to shoot innocent people, only to be ignored by privates with cooler heads. It seems their battle sense is less than ideal. Given the stress of the situation, I will absolutely listen to my instincts before diving headfirst into a half-baked scheme. Perhaps there is no military right, however these past couple of months have suggested it's necessary." So the divide kind of came when Pat Tillman was, sadly, don't get me wrong, it was really sad and we should honor his death, when he was killed by friendly fire. He wasn't a gunfight. He was killed in friendly fire by an American soldier. Speculation came out that he was going to rat some secrets out to the rest of the world about this overseas effort in Iraq and the Bush administration, and of course that couldn't get out. And that's kind of where it caused the divide, because you had one side over here say, no, he was a hero, he sacrificed himself for his country, he fought for his country, which he did fight for his country. I'm not taking away the actions that he did prior to his death as a Green Beret and in the Army. But the other side would say, no, it was a cover-up and we shouldn't be in the Middle East, and it just caused divide. And of course, after his death, that was covered up for a couple weeks, even from his family. He was eventually released that he was shot in a friendly fire. But that didn't stop America and the warmongering machine and the Bush administration from portraying his death as, hey, they killed one of our good ones. They killed Pat Tillman, and we need to keep furthering our efforts if they're going to keep killing heroes like this. So the whole thing was a sad situation in Pat Tillman's case, but he's an example of kind of a modern day non-social issue. So it brings me to the bulk of my paper, which is in the research, is the social issues. So social issues in sports, whether we like it or not, have had some really pivotal parts in America, and they've really had a lot of impact on the history of America, and you'll see them in history books. I alluded to Jackie Robinson earlier. He was the first African American to be in the MLB, and he kind of paved the way. There's still a day honored to him, and teams will wear number 42 to honor him. And there's classic Disney movies like Remember the Titans and Glory Road, when they depict a mainly black coach or team that goes on to win championships and kind of break down these barriers, especially in the 60s and the 50s. The movie Glory Road, produced by Disney, is about the Texas Western, which is now known as UTEP, University of Texas El Paso. Their basketball team started 5 African Americans, and they were the first team to ever do that at the college level. Now it's just the norm. So there's been a lot of really, really great moments in history where sports have kind of broken down and helped some of these barriers. But in terms of the modern day, you have to look at these 2 examples that I have on the screen. There's of course more. I just chose these 2. So the first one is Colin Kaepernick. And this kind of gets into also my point that there's 2 sides. And a lot of these times, of course, they fall under their political spectrum. So the Colin Kaepernick incident, taking a knee, happened in 2016, took a knee, protested the national anthem. And it caused a lot of uproar because, again, like Pat Tillman, Colin Kaepernick was a really successful football player. He played in a Super Bowl, won the NFC Championship, was a couple plays away from beating the Ravens to win that Super Bowl. But he took a knee in response to social injustices in America, police brutality, cop shooting innocent people, the justice system. He took a knee as a way to kind of say, America, we need to do better. He took a knee to stand up for the minorities who were being wrongfully accused of this, that, and this. And of course, people on the more politically progressive liberal side thought it was great. He's using his platform to protest, police brutality and all these social issues. Then, of course, on the right, You had people not upset about this. He's anti-American. He's kneeling during the national anthem. It's not patriotic. It's not respectful to our country and the men and women who have died. And so again, that kind of fell under the more politically driven right, and of course, it just divided the country. And again, some people might see it this way, that he was definitely right. The people left, he was right to do that. The people to the right say he was wrong to do that. Really, when you look at it as a whole, it wasn't that cut and dry. It wasn't as cut and dry as the Nazis or clear cut racism. In the 60s, there were weight on both sides, and then the right also pointed to when he wore socks depicting cops as pigs. I mean, there's a lot of baggage on both sides of the argument, and neither side could be ignored, and it just caused more and more divide. It was just issues being forced into politics. And and then over here on the right, we have the 2019. This was last summer. Women's national soccer team. They won the World Cup for the fourth time out of 8 years. The Women's World Cup has only been around for about 8 years. Started in '90 because they have it every 4 years. They won with dominating fashion. They killed everyone. This was again they've won 4 out of the 8 that have been available. They really should have won 5. They kind of got upset to Japan a couple World Cups ago, but nonetheless, they dominate. They are hands down the world's best team, and it's really not that close. And everything was all good. They won a World Cup. Everyone was excited. And then they kind of started to come out and see, and a couple of their players, especially like Megan Rapinoe, and a couple of them came out and protested about the pay. They're not getting paid that much. They win the World Cup, the absolutely highest recognition you could for any soccer player, man or woman, and their pay was not very much, especially compared to their male counterparts. The men's USA team didn't even qualify for the World Cup in 2018, and they've never gone past the round of 16. And the woman over here saying, hey, we've won this thing 50% of the time it's been available to us. Why are we getting paid substantially less than the men? And it's sexism. It's bad for it's against women. It's bad for women, and that's again kind of one side of the argument that they should get paid as much as men. They're doing the exact same work, they're doing the same exercises, they're playing literally the same sport. All the rules are the same field, same ball, same goal, same amount of players, same everything. But the men are getting paid more, and we're better. Why? Then, of course, you have one side of the argument that over here and says, well, you have to look at the finances. For example, the Men's World Cup in 2018 had a revenue in the billions, and the Women's World Cup in 2019 only had in the low millions. I want to say 40 to 50 million. And you look on that side and say it's just financially not possible for you to make as much as men. And then, of course, the grand scheme of things, men's soccer is just more popular than women's soccer. And again, you can point to sexism, people not giving women a chance. You can point to a lot of things, but that's two sides of the argument. And again, both sides hold baggage. And then the pay doesn't just stop in women's soccer; it also stops in WNBA. The WNBA is obviously the women's professional basketball compared to the NBA, the men's. And the women, again, make substantially less than men. LeBron James makes over $30 million a year. The highest paid women's basketball player is only making maybe 6 figures. And they're doing, again, the same thing. Same sport, same court, same rules, same amount of players, same everything. And they're getting paid less than their men. But in the book Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, it's the book that I cited in my research paper, Clay Travis, the author, cites that in the WNBA Finals Championship, because they play a best of 5, in the NBA they play a best of 7. So in just one particular game in the WNBA Women's Championship, there was only about 400,000 people watching their game. In a game in the men's finals, there was about 18 million people watching. So again, just comes back to this stance. It's like financially you can't, but over here they are doing the same amount of work. Again, there's just two sides pulling at this string of fairness and equality in politics and sports. And what it boils down to is there a solution? Is there a solution to what's going on? And again, it would depend on what side you're on. You think there is and there isn't. But the overarching goal, and it's talked about in my paper and in the book Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, for example, that these politics are being forced on our throat because there's no clear-cut wrong or right scenario. Again, like with the pay gap, it's like you have to look at the finances, but then again, you have to look at, the women are doing just as much work as the men, if not more, and they're getting paid less. Both sides carry weight. Again, I keep alluding back to it. It's not, in the days before Title IX where women were lucky to get maybe basketball as their high school sport, and then all they had was cheerleading and flag twirling. There's sides to everything that are a little more technical now. And so when they see these and they see just these instances being forced on our throats, or as they see it, like the way it's being forced on our throats, people are getting fed up with it because it's always in the news. They claim, how about you leave the politics to Fox News and MSNBC and CNN and all those reporters and let sports just play. The famous line, shut up and dribble. which is, an argument for another day. But that's kind of the spot we're at. The solution is hard because it's like politics. Both sides you have opinions, and one side makes a good point, the other side makes a good point. It's going to be hard to find that common ground, but it's important to look at both sides of the argument. And again, it's going to be interesting to see if we ever do find a solution. And so the conclusion here is just to realize how similar sports and politics really are. There's a quote I used in my paper from a document I found in the GBC database. It says, much like contemporary politics, sports are well covered in ever-changing territory that include a wide range of voices, multiple perspectives of people, and a varying degree of experience and training. They're the same thing. You look at one team to another in basketball. You have a Lakers fan and a Celtics fan. They hate each other. It's a rival. They have this, they have that, but ultimately they want the same goal of championship. Same in politics. You have the right and the left. The right obviously wants America to prosper, and so does the left. However, they have different approaches. They're hand in hand the same thing when you really kind of look down to it, and that's why they're so intertwined and always will be, especially in the social aspect field, because they've broken down so many barriers and they continue to break down barriers. Sports are great at that, but as a whole, there's always going to be, the politics being injected into sports where it doesn't need to be. Or if you're on the Kaepernick side, you like it. These athletes are using their platform to do that. And then again, if you're not on his side, they should just stay out of it. It's entertainment. Let the politicians do the talking. There's always going to be a back and forth between the two. And again, whatever side you fall on politically or political being, it's probably what side you are going to, side with, just like politics, with these social issues among sports. So that's all I got. So thank you guys, and hope it was all right.